Greetings to each and every one. Welcome again as we step inside another episode of the Cool Game Podcast, brought to you by the Reggae Planet Radio Showcase inside the Reggae Planet Spotlight. Once again, we're going on a journey inside the Cool Game Podcast series, presented by Reggae Planet Spotlight, and today we're talking about what's going on in Toronto Maple Leafs land, part 2. What about the coach and the general manager? People are talking about the coach and the general manager. People are saying, maybe we should consider firing the coach or the general manager. What do you think in Maple Leafs land? But you know the problem is, sometimes the fans get too impatient and they get jumpy, and then the pressure rises. And in the past, Toronto has been making big mistakes in management decisions over the years. It was worse during the 80s, in the infamous Harold Ballard days, where the management seemed uninterested in really, spending money on the team to get the team going in a serious manner. Those days, the management seemed like as long as they could make money from the game as an entertainment, they didn't really push to make the team into a championship team. It was lots of controversy when the Toronto Maple Leafs were owned by Harold Ballard in the 80s. Was rough times, and they went through a lot of different management over the years and coaches and all of that. But now it's a new day in Toronto, and as you can see, they've hired new management. Brendan Shanahan, President of Hockey Operations. Kyle Dubas, the General Manager. And they got Sheldon Keefe as the coach. So far, so good. The team is looking talented and skillful on paper. And in the regular season, they're doing fine. But when it comes to the playoffs, they're having problems. They're having troubles. They've been knocked out in the very first round 5 years in a row. So now the situation is getting serious in Toronto. The pressure is on. The people are arguing and saying, should they fire the coach? Should they fire the general manager? But as I was saying before, back in the days, in the 1980s, the Toronto Maple Leafs used to have very impatient management. In those days, the managers used to trade players with impatience. A lot of times they traded away so many good players, and those good players went on to win Stanley Cups with other teams. Yes, indeed. Situations like that. But when it comes down now to this year, they're saying that Kyle Dubas, the general manager of the Toronto Maple Leafs, some are saying maybe he's too young. He's one of the youngest general managers in the history of the NHL. He came into the league before he was even 30 years old. He was hired. Yes, indeed. And since that time, he's been making progress. He's been putting his stamp on the Toronto Maple Leafs organization and the player selection and even the style of play. He believes in scoring. He believes in skillful puck handling. He believes in talented, offensive type of game. But they always say it takes defense to win championships. How many times have you heard that? I've heard it since I was a child. They're always saying it takes defense to win championships. So it doesn't matter how great and powerful and skillful the team is up front. You got to make sure the team is solid in goal. You got to also make sure the team is solid on defense. And when you check out the Toronto Maple Leafs from a general manager's point of view, they've been saying what's going on now is the general manager put all his eggs in one basket because he spent all his money on just the forwards. Yes, he has some of the best forwards in the leagues. He has the great Austin Matthews and Mitch Marner, as well as John Tavares and William Nylander. Yes, indeed. And on top of that, he has one of the best offensive defensemen in the league, the great Morgan Riley. But he has spent so much money on these top players that people are saying he doesn't have enough money now to balance the rest of the team, because there's a salary cap in the NHL. Each team can only spend about $81 million. No more than $81 million. I believe something like that, right? It's called the salary cap. You're not allowed to spend more than $81 million on the team. Doesn't matter how rich the team is. You know what I'm saying? That's just the rules of the game. Because they don't want teams who are richer than some other teams to buy their way to a championship. So what is going on with the Toronto Maple Leafs is that the general manager, he spent almost half of the budget on 4 players. He paid them something like $10 million each to get them on the Toronto Maple Leafs and to sign them to long-term contracts. So it looked good for a while, but now that they're not winning in the playoffs, people are complaining and saying maybe he spent too much money on the top players. He spent too much money on Mitch Marner. He spent too much money on John Tavares. You know, maybe he spent even too much money on William Nylander. Who knows? Or even maybe some of them think that he spent too much money on Austin Matthews, the greatest goal scorer right now on the Toronto Maple Leafs. He's the one who won the Rocket Richard Trophy for most goals in a season. So what's going on is that the people are so upset in Toronto because of the playoffs failures that they're suggesting firing the coach and the general manager. They're saying the general manager is messing up the team because he's not balancing the team properly. But you know, personally, I think that the general manager is trying to do something good for Toronto. That's what I really think. Because back in the days, in the Harold Ballard days, sometimes the Leafs was too shy to make the decision to really spend the money to get the right top players. So I believe Kyle Dubas now, he was trying to say, we're bold and we're strong, and we're going to spend the money and get some really good players on this team. And I congratulate him for that, because these top players, they're some of the greatest in the entire NHL and in the world of hockey. So why not have them on the Toronto Maple Leafs? Why trade them to another team? Next thing you hear, oh, he was traded to another team and that team went on to win the Stanley Cup. I say keep the top 4, but you gotta find a way to do it. You know what I'm saying? We know that Austin Matthews is a great goal scorer. We also know that William Nylander is one of the very best. He had a great Stanley Cup playoffs last season. He was one of the best. He was one of the most effective. We know that Mitch Marner is a great skillful hockey player, a great playmaker. But, you know, there's complaints about how he's doing in the playoffs. Can he really compete when the going gets tough and rough in the playoffs, when everything gets more tough, you know, because people are playing with more desperation? Can he up his game in the playoffs? And if he could do that, then maybe he could be the greatest Mitch Marner. So let's not trade him away for nothing. Let's give him some more time to prove himself on the team. What about John Tavares? He's one of the greatest too. He's the captain of the Toronto Maple Leafs right now. And he's good on the team. He has a lot of points per game in his career. So you gotta respect players like that. Maybe another team take him and they go on to win the Stanley Cup. So I think Kyle Dubas is trying to show some patience. What about the coach? Should they fire the coach? Nah, maybe give him one more season. But he needs to up his game too, because in the playoffs last year, arguably, he was outcoached by the Montreal Canadiens coach. Can you imagine? Why did that happen? It looks like he wasn't adjusting on the fly. Sometimes, you know, you gotta make some different decisions. You gotta change up some of the line combinations and stuff like that. And it looks like he was, you know, he was just trying to stick to his routine and stuff. But sometimes you gotta change things up because the next team is studying what you've been doing. So you gotta find some other ways and do some things and surprise them and, you know, switch up some guys. I remember back in the days, in the Doug Gilmour days, man, to me that was one of the best Toronto Maple Leafs team. And, you know what I'm saying, They knew how to switch him up. Sometimes they had Doug Gilmore playing on the power play. Sometimes they had him playing on the checking line. Sometimes they had him playing on the scoring line. So maybe the coach just got to figure it out, do some more things, switch it up a bit in the playoffs. Yes, indeed. You've been listening to the Cool Game Podcast, brought to you by the Reggae Planet Radio Showcase, inside the Reggae Planet Spotlight. Today we've been talking about, should the Toronto Maple Leafs fire the coach? Should they fire the general manager? I say give them one more year. And let's see what happens in the upcoming season. Can they compete in the Atlantic Division? Can they make the playoffs? And most of all, can they win a few rounds? Can they go on to the finals? Can they in fact break the Stanley Cup drought in Toronto? And can they win a Stanley Cup championships? Let's see what happens next season. Thank you for tuning in. Next time, we're going to talk about the players. Should they trade the top players or should they keep them? Let's see. Should they work with patience or should they work with impatience? It's the Cool Game Podcast, and today we've been talking about the Toronto Maple Leafs. What's going on in the Maple Leafs land? Cool Game Podcast. Tune in again next time and we'll continue the story.